Thank you.
God, it was so brilliant too.
No, it should be working now. Somebody accidentally hit the.
Wonder who that would be.
May or may not have been me. I apologize for that, but Zoom should have hearing now, so if they would just check and let us know if they can hear now.
Can you check? See if it's coming in.
Okay, great.
Text, yes.
Next thing on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, one from our last regular meeting, one from a special meeting. And do we have any comments or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I have corrections from the April 17 meeting. I have successfully cloned myself. I was absent at the meeting, but I voted in all of the votes, so I would suggest that those vote totals be correct.
Have you got that? You go on.
I show him absent on the approval of the minutes.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, yeah. Tony, I will get that fixed before we put that online.
I move to approve the April 17th minutes
With corrections.
with correction.
Good correction. Good. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
I
Opposed?
Abstain. Abstain. Okay.
All right, what are our next minutes? I've lost the page.
May 1st.
Okay, May for a special meeting. Any corrections or additions to that?
I move to approve May 1st meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, minutes are approved. The next thing is gonna be public comment and correspondence, but let's talk about the order of our agenda time, or do you, planning commissioners, would be willing to adjust things? Here's what I'm thinking. I don't think that people in the audience and on Zoom are here for outdoor display of goods. And so what, could we move that to the back? Before we set our new meeting schedule for next. And then we could go after public correspondence. The comments, we can go right into our learning segment on zoning district. Does that sound good? All right, seeing consent on that. All right, next thing on the agenda is the public comment and correspondence. This is the time when members of the audience or on Zoom can make a comment or a suggestion or anything that we think we ought to know about something which is not on tonight's agenda. Come on up, with all the people, it'll probably be a little more formal tonight. In terms of being on here, Jim.
Yes, you're on.
Mark Rondell, 181 Zoll. Planning Commission, I've mentioned this book before, Arbitrary Lines by M. Nolan Gray. And I would like to read to you the quote that encouraged me to purchase and go through and read the book. Quote from Nolan Gray: zoning is not a good institution gone bad. Its purpose is not to address traditional externalities or coordinate growth with infrastructure as suggested by zoning defenders and envisioned in the sanitized SimCity version of city planning. On the contrary, zoning is a mechanism of exclusion designed to inflate property values, slow the pace of new development, segregate cities by race and class, and enshrine the detached single-family house as the exclusive urban ideal. Always has been. The author substantiates his claims by citing a couple of the earliest municipal regulations enacted in 1916. One was in New York City, where wealthy Fifth Avenue retail landlords objected to the spread of the garment district businesses on the grounds that their, quote, young Jewish immigrant workers would leave the factory floors to window shop along Fifth Avenue. Retail landlords characterizing these workers as flies feared they would scare off their elite clientele and so turned to zoning to shoo away their employers. The other, also in 1916, was in Berkeley, California, where by banning, quote, by banning all but the most expensive forms of housing, namely detached single-family homes on large lots, Berkeley thus pioneered a form of state-sanctioned residential class segregation that defines zoning to this day. As in New York, this Berkeley regulation was racially motivated to exclude the proliferation of the Chinese and their laundries. The most restrictive communities that I am aware of, and the farthest on, as I mentioned last time, my scale of total property rights versus zero property rights, the farthest to one end are the elite private clubs where homeowners willingly give up all personal freedoms for the security of knowing that the club will police their neighbors and deal with any unsavory situations not conforming to their rigid and highly arbitrary standards. As I listen to the hours of discussion taking place here, as we go in our effort to restructure the Harbor Springs zoning code, I am struck by how frequently we continue to move in this tightly defined direction and how willing we are to sacrifice personal property freedoms in order to conform our community to more and more arbitrary standards. This is not consistent with the historic diversity of our public town. If it is our intent to turn Harbor Springs into an exclusive elite private club, I feel this goal should be clearly stated in our master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments or suggestions? Looks like Robert.
If you want to take online.
Yeah, let's go to Robert Hall on Zoom.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So thank you for allowing me a chance to speak. My name is Robert Hall, 409 Glen Drive. First, a huge thank you to the Planning Commission members, the community volunteers who have worked so hard to make decisions about the future, the appearance, and the lifestyle of Harbor Springs. Some of those decisions were straightforward and practical, and others were far more controversial. One of the most polarizing moments came with the adoption, as we all know, of Ordinance 439. Many in the community saw it as a dramatic push to urbanize our small town, a vision in sharp contrast to what Harbor Springs has always been, and what a majority hoped it would always be. It's been said that if more citizens had participated earlier, we might have avoided such a divisive outcome. In the last few months, that requested community input has soared in order to work together to shape a more broadly supported zoning recommendation for our future, hopefully. To our City Council, the majority of our citizens felt that the outside involvement of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and its arm of the Redevelopment Ready Communities had far too great an influence in the agenda to drive developer-friendly, high-density zoning that threatened the historic nature of our town with a future far from what anyone initially imagined. So to mention the City Council for peacemaking, for removing the outside influence, a big thank you for them, whose requirements helped fuel so much anxiety and division. However, that anxiety still exists today. It exists tonight. Hopefully, Planning Commission's actions will go a long way toward calming that anxiety so that we never, ever have to face another divisive referendum again. The RRC that the City Council suspended was strongly connected to problematic proposals for a lot of people. Combining residential districts was one of them. Each district exists for an historic reason in our town. Please support keeping the 2005 zoning districts with only small property owner-driven adjustments. 2, by right development of duplexes and ADUs. Allowing by right construction of duplexes and triplexes in single-family neighborhoods was a key reason voters pushed back on 439. What does by right mean? It means whatever construction is authorized in the new ordinance leaves existing property owners with no right to protest no matter how strongly they feel. 3, setbacks and parcel sizes. Our town is only 1.3 square miles. Reducing setbacks and decreasing lot sizes would result in higher density neighborhoods and parking problems. Instead, we support keeping existing lot sizes and increasing setbacks, not shrinking them to avoid congestion. And 4th, the Ag District west of the Bluff Gardens. Please preserve the agriculture district. And also please allow Ottawa through Arbor Street property owners to decide their own zoning preferences. In closing, thank you all for responding to these emotional community concerns. We all know they were emotional and they still are. This time the community is actively working with the Planning Commission in hopes of preserving the character, the future of what makes Harbor Springs such a special place and unique place in time. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. Here. And again, this is for something not on the agenda tonight, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
not on the agenda tonight. Good evening, Planning Commission, here in Alphagan, Houston Road. I'm here to inform you and our community of a new and I think exciting organization that was formed to influence the preservation of historic structures, iconic sites, and streetscapes in and around Harbor Springs. Our group has already formed and we're seeking 501c3 status. Our organization name is Preservation 49740. You can find us for our contact information in the About Town section of the Harbor Light newspaper, and we will be advertising throughout the summer. We're actively looking for new volunteers who share a love and concern for our historic structures. Those interested in this worthy cause can get a hold of us at preservation49740@gmail.com. We also have obtained the domain rights of preservation49740.com. We're still constructing it, so if you go there, you're gonna see it's in process, but we'll have data up there in the coming months, now weeks. Our goal is to play a role in helping shape the new Harbor Springs zoning code and foster a working relationship between historic preservation and development. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right, any other comments?
We do have Chris Heiner online.
Let's go to Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the feedback and all the hard work that the City Council and Planning Commission is doing. And I just want to say I am excited about the possibility of increasing housing in our town. I don't think it's something to be fearful of. Let's be honest, most of the lots are already developed, especially along the waterfront. There are still some places where you can build on side streets where there's larger lots. I think that multi-unit dwellings, whether it's condos or triplexes, on larger lots where it is appropriate, would be a big boost for our city, give young people a place to live, young families a chance to rent or buy close to jobs and school. And housing is a big concern in this across our entire country. 100% of people understand that we don't have enough housing stock in this country. So, but they, a lot of people want it to be built somewhere else, but I see it as a boost for our town and our community so that we get, a wider range of people that can live in our town, not just the people that already are there and have homes. Let's make opportunities for young families and young people to get a start. So I appreciate the consideration for, all types of housing across, the economic spectrum. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, last call for public.
Matt Golseth, 179 Summit. I'm gonna state just some facts. Last fall, what was 404 to 474? That's 74 vote difference. So there's 46% of our city that voted for the old zoning. And now that we've eliminated the RRC boogeyman, I think people should be a lot less fearful about a town that is literally a ghost town 9 months out of the year with regards to the number of people in this town, the number of people supporting the businesses. So think about year round and also think about, we're not even close to filling up the city with regards to density. I think it's comical. We're worried about density in Harbor Springs. The irony, part of the most charming part of Harbor Springs is below the bluff. Before we have zoning regulations that allow tight building. So I'm for a community, I'm on top of the bluff, where there's a lot of acreage where you can, I've owned duplexes before. Duplexes and triplexes aren't owned by master communities or huge entrepreneurs with tons of bucks. They're small entrepreneurs. So think of incremental development, think of small development. Don't be afraid of duplexes and triplexes because the financing mechanisms aren't out there for big business. Those are homeowner occupied businesses. And they're good for a community.
Okay, other comments, other general comments about things not on the agenda?
Mr. Mulder, we're gonna be, Tyler and I, just because we have 3 large events, we'll be in and out tonight. We have the Captain Phillips at the Legion, and we have a very controversial school board meeting that we'll be attending, so we'll be in and out. So if anybody needs anything, please call us.
Okay, don't worry about us.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me review from the beginning where we've been on the journey so far in 2025. The Planning Commission and City Council and the community kicked off a series of discussions earlier this year. We had 10 town hall meetings and open houses. They were well attended and really productive. We had wide ranging, free flowing discussion, got a lot of ideas. Planning Commission has met twice a month since then. And in the very beginning, we did a lot of work to take a look at the existing zoning code, the old zoning code, the current zoning code, that is. And we identified a number of factors that made us say this thing could be better. There are some risks and there are some gaps in that. There are some potentially undesirable outcomes that could come out of that zoning code. And so that's what led us down this track of working really hard with the community earlier this year and up until this time. So this isn't a new thing. We're not making up ideas or reasons to change something that's great. We think it can be better. There was wide consensus among the community and among planning commission members that we got to take off from the repealed zoning code format because it had some significant advantages in usability, clarity, and a whole number of reasons. So that's what's brought us here today. And each of us has a single slide that we have up here, and these are the reasons and the goals for the zoning code update. I'll just read them for you so you're clear with us. And first is to sync with the city's master plan, improve clarity and usability for residents, reduce bureaucratic processes and costs for residents, provide more options for property owners, address those potentially undesirable outcomes from the current zoning code, and to anticipate the future needs of Harbor Springs residents. So that's what we agreed to with the community. That's what the Planning Commission agreed to. That's why we embarked on this thing. So just to set the stage, maybe it's a good reminder for us all that everybody hold up your copy because we're going to be looking at it as we make decisions. Okay. All right. So the main topic tonight is zoning districts, and those are the divisions within a town that allow different levels of regulation. So what we're not going to do tonight is to talk about uses or dimensions or approvals. My goal, and I'm going to suggest to the Planning Commission, is just to come away today with a straw man for what the zoning districts could be organized like. And it could be anything. It could be 17, it could be 9, it could be something else, it could be different divisions, it could be different definitions. I don't know yet. That's what we can work through. So Planning Commission, does that sound like a fair goal tonight, just to come away with a straw man of zoning districts and how those could be organized? We're not going to adopt them. We're not going to define them in detail. Just give us something to come into the next meeting with. All right, sounds like we have a plan. And then to set the stage for a discussion on zoning districts, the public asked us to put together another learning segment. That's a good approach that we've been using. And John Michaelangeli, our planning consultant, put this together for us. And he's going to give us an intro into zoning and districts.
Yep.
Actually, I think Mark could probably give the presentation as well. I think as part of your deliberation on understanding what a zoning district is, I think it's important to kind of understand the context of where zoning came from and what it was used for. So you can use that kind of as a foundation. The beginning of zoning actually started back in the early 1900s as nuisance lawsuits against property owners. Some of it had to do with, for example, the construction of a slaughterhouse in a residential neighborhood or in proximity to homes. Of course, the homeowners didn't appreciate that, so what they do, there was not zoning at the time, so they filed a nuisance lawsuit. And that's how zoning, pre-zoning, that's how these cases were litigated. They were litigated not at the local level, but at the court level, based on what property owners, what they felt their property rights were being impacted. Even before zoning, if you go to the next beginning, Mark cited a couple of cases in New York and in California related to basically the concept of zoning to discriminate. But a good example that's used in planning school is in 1916, the city of New York passed a code, could have been called a zoning code, but it was basically building regulations that required the skyscrapers to be stepped back from each other, primarily to allow daylight into the major corridors. So this was to prevent urban shadowing, where some streets never saw daylight because of the size of the buildings. So you can see some of the preliminary drawings that were done at the time and what the result was. And if you go to New York on some of the major corridors, many of the skyscrapers are stacked this way. In 1922, if you go to the next slide, Jeff, Herbert Hoover, former president, was Secretary of the Department of Commerce. And under his direction, they prepared the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act as a model to try to put their arms around this issue that was going on in communities relative to the number of lawsuits and various litigation. And this was prepared in 1922, and it was made available to the states in the Union at the time. And within about a 2-year period, some of the literature indicates over 350 communities adopted this model code. So everybody in those communities were starting to basically develop their land use patterns using the same standards regardless of the historic development pattern of their communities. The real legs to zoning came in 1926 when the Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty. Ambler Realty had bought property that was inside and adjacent to a well-developed single-family subdivision with the idea of putting in a lumber yard at the time. And of course, back in the 1920s, lumber yards weren't like they are today, where the lumber is brought in by semi-truck. Lumber yards back then cut the lumber, planed it, and there was a lot of dust and dirt, a lot of noise that went along with it. The Village of Euclid sued Ambler Realty, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's where the Supreme Court basically solidified the constitutionality of zoning and the rights for local units of government to basically control how land use would be developed in their communities. And starting back in 1926, this type of zoning code is still called the Euclidean zoning code. And that's what you have here in Harbor Springs. You have a Euclidean zoning code that dates back to 1926. The acceleration of zoning started with the Federal Housing Administration within the Federal Housing Administration, there was FHA. Okay, and that was the financial component, the insurance, mortgage insurance component. They encouraged the development of single-family homes in suburban areas. Basically to the point where if you wanted to finance a house in an urban area, you were not going to be able to get the financing because they felt the financing in existing cities was too risky. Therefore, based on that, developers started building subdivisions in greenfields. And the subdivisions were actually based on FHA development guidelines. It had a significant impact on urban planning. In the state of Michigan, for example, the first ring of suburbs around the city of Detroit, for example, Pleasant Ridge, Huntington, Berkeley, those communities were basically developed in response to people not being able to get mortgages inside the city of Detroit. Therefore, the developers went out and started the first ring of suburbs around Detroit for the financing. And this really accelerated the use of large single-family communities, getting away from the various housing typologies that we usually found in urban areas. Single-family duplexes, cottage courts, multiple family, those type of housing types. In 1954, they passed the Housing Act of 1954, which kind of further accelerated this whole concept of defining zoning by various stringent districts. And in the Fair Housing Act, there was a section that planners loved called Section 701. Section 701 provided grants to states, who in turn provided grants to local units of governments at a very, I would say, favorable grant ratio. When I first started in the planning field, I came in at the tail end of the Section 701 program, and communities could get a 90% grant from the state to prepare a master plan and a zoning code. I know that there was a lot of fear here in town about the state or the city receiving RRC technical money to prepare a zoning code. I will bet you that part of the current zoning ordinance here was originally prepared back in the 701 era with money from the state of Michigan. The grants, or the amount of grants that were generated and the amount of zoning codes significantly accelerated. And what was one of the favorite tools that communities were using? They were using model zoning ordinances. So basically it was cutting and pasting, taking what was already been in one community and then tailoring it, or cutting it and then reusing it. And it really became, between 1954 and 1981, a lot of planning commissions were using this money to create their master plans and zoning codes. For example, in the city of Petoskey, their first zoning ordinance, one that they're currently looking at, was actually adopted in 1974, and it used Section 701 funds. Okay, that's why in many communities you'll have, I can be blindfolded, go to a community, and I can say your front yard setback is 25 feet, your rear yard setback is 35, your side yard setbacks are a combination of 15, but 5 on one side. Where did that come from? It came from the 701, and it came from the model zoning codes. I would say in the state of Michigan, about 75% of the zoning ordinance, 75% of the zoning ordinance to some degree have those same setbacks. So that has nothing to do with the historical development patterns of the community. It's based on a code that dates back to 1922. So what is a zoning district? Well, the unintended consequences of all this, let me go back, I skipped a slide, was that communities started to put land uses in neat little buckets. So we had R1A, which was large lot residential, R1B, medium, R1C, kind of low medium, R1D, lowest medium. Okay, here in town you have R1, you have R1A, B, C, and E. Okay, so you've got these nice little neat buckets that all of the different houses and land uses go into. What it did nationally, it increased the amount of the vehicle miles traveled. Instead of having integrated communities where people could walk, people now have to get in a car and drive to get a gallon of milk. Okay? A recent study issued that was done as part of the Congress for New Urbanism, a professor figured out that if every community in the country increased their density by 1%, that it would do more to get rid of the carbon footprint than electric vehicles and any other type of energy conservation tool we could use. It decreased walkability. And from my perspective, as a kid that grew up in a neighborhood that had a local grocery store, had a guy that used to fix your shoes, and actually had a guy where you could take a bicycle to and he would fix it, it actually kind of created the demise to the traditional neighborhoods that people in the 60s and 50s, the 40s, 50s, and 60s grew up in. It promoted sprawl. And obviously, because everything gets pigeonholed into single family lots, it decreased density, significantly lower density, but promoted sprawl, because in order to provide housing for the community, you couldn't do it in such a way where it would be walkable and it would create community. You spread it out with infrastructure that was both costly in terms of sewers, water, and roads. And it increased construction, development, and infrastructure costs. And this last bullet point we see today, this is one of the most significant barriers for housing in today's climate. Right now, the minimum per square foot cost, when I talk to builders, is $350 to $350. In this area, it's probably somewhere between $500 to $750 a square foot, depending on the quality of the home and what you have in it. So it's really increased construction costs and infrastructure. So what is a zoning district? It's an area in the community that contains a set of permitted and special land uses. And it doesn't necessarily reflect the historical development path. So, one gentleman that spoke, regarding the new formation and preservation 49740, in terms of trying to integrate historical components into the zoning code, in my perspective, is very appropriate, because your current zoning code, the one that we're currently operating under, the smallest lot size is R1C, which I pointed out. That's 6,500 square feet. That doesn't relate to your historical pattern. The smallest lot in the community is the Crandall subdivision over on 3rd and 4th. And those lot sizes are 6,864 square feet. So the historical development pattern was actually higher than the 6,500, which is in the current zoning code. And you can see by this table that all of the front yard setbacks are 25 feet, 40. The rear yard setbacks are 30 and 30. The height is all 35 feet, and the lot coverage averages between 25 to 40% based on the size of the lot. So in many cases, these type of dimensional requirements don't reflect actually how properties are developed in the community. So what happens when zoning requirements lack local context? In the next slide, Jeff, is that you have site nonconformities. You have properties that don't meet the current code. You also have an increased frequency of variance appeals before the zoning board of appeals. People need a variance on the front yard setback, need one on the side yard, because they can't fit the house within the context of the zoning district that has been overlaid on top of it. And the local character can slowly change from a traditional to a suburban format. And that's happened in some communities. So as we mentioned in one of our learning lessons, how are uses regulated in a district? Well, you have a district use, which could be single family or business. And you have two types of uses. One gentleman referred in his comments as by right. Those are actually permitted uses. And then you have special uses. And we went through that in one of the learning sessions, that a special land use requires a public hearing, and it requires people within 300 feet to be notified, and there's extra standards that are applied by the planning commission as part of the review process. However, what happens in many of the codes, if you thoroughly read the permitted uses or the special land uses, there is a concept that's embedded in the code, and you have it here in Harbor Springs, which was referred to as pyramid or stacking. And that means, I'll give you an example. Your R1 district includes single family. All right. Your R2 district, which is your two-family district, allows single family. So you have single family R2, or we're going to bring single family into that district. So you're stacking it on top of each other. The RM district allows R1B uses. So the RM district, which is multiple, also allows the uses that are in R1B. And the ROS, which is your office district, residential office district, allows R2 two-family as a special land use. So that brings a land use out of the R2 into that district that says if you're going to do it, we have to use the special land use requirement, which requires the public hearing. And your TR district, which is your transitional residential district, allows for R2 uses. So in the TR district, you can put a duplex. Okay, so that's the concept of pyramids or stacking. And in a lot of zoning codes, like the one here, you really have to thoroughly read it, the uses and the special uses, to find out how they're weaved through the various districts. So what's the difference between the districts? Really, fundamentally, it's the size of the lot. It's not the use. Okay. Example: your R1A, your R1B, your R1C, your R1E all allow single family homes. The only difference is the size of the lot and the setbacks. Okay. And in a community like Harbor Springs, which is pretty much built out, as one of the other participants said, lot size, in my opinion, is really not an issue. So if you take a look at the next slide, based on what we know, these are the only areas left in the city that have lots that can accommodate a residential land use. Most of them, in the majority of the city, are fragmented lots that are scattered throughout. We have a couple of maybe mid-sized level parcels, maybe a half an acre, an acre. Of course, the largest parcels are on the west side of the city, which are not served by utilities that were part of the Bluff Gardens. But overall, potential buildable lots in town are pretty limited. So the summary is, zoning started in response to nuisance lawsuits. The federal government passed a model that was readily accepted by a lot of communities, but with that, they adopted all of the same standards, which meant that all the communities started looking the same way. Supreme Court held up constitutional zoning, and the Fair Housing Act of 1954 really accelerated the use of everybody kind of using the same standards, because it gave a lot of money to a lot of municipalities basically to adopt these codes. And they used a lot of the same codes in the same communities. So it's not surprising that communities have developed since the 70s and 80s that look the same way because of that. And zoning districts, especially residential, really have the same uses, but the only difference is the lot size. So, which are sometimes, as I mentioned here, in conflict with local development patterns. The lots don't necessarily match up with how the community was historically developed back in the 1990s and 1910s. So kind of that's the context of what you need to deal with and think about when you're talking about creating districts, is these, what is really behind, why do we have zoning districts? What's the positives and what are the negatives?
Great, thank you, John. Why don't we go to questions from the planning commission members, if there are any discussion with John?
Yeah, I have one. Thank you, John. A hypothetical: in the current code, if I owned a very large lot today, does the current code allow me, if I choose to, tear down the existing home, and I'll use the phrase by right, split that lot into smaller lots, provided they conform to the requirements, and then build multiple homes on that lot?
I can answer that
Go
one.
ahead.
It depends on how many child parcels you would be creating. That's generally the phrase that we use in land division, is You have the parent parcel, the original parcel you start with, and then the child parcels that you're creating. That's actually covered in the city code. We have the language regarding lot splits and the approval process. If a property owner has a parcel and the number of child parcels would be, I believe the number is 4 or less, that is something that's kind of a permitted ability or a by right use that that property owner has. And assuming that they meet all of the zoning requirements for lot size and frontage and things like that, that can be done administratively. If the number of parcels that they would be creating would be 5 or more, then the city code says you have to move to one of the development processes that are outlined in the zoning code, basically using some type of a condominium document to kind of govern how that's going to be done. And then that would basically transition over to us having meetings and using either the plan development section or one of the other sections of the zoning code to review the approval process for how that would happen. Does that answer your? Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that answer is also, Jeff, offhand, what's the minimum width of an R1C?
Minimum width in R1C is 65.
Okay.
Right now.
And the reason why I picked R1C is that those are a lot of the residential areas above the bluff. If you had a parcel in the R1C that, what's it, 65, the width? If you had a parcel in the R1C that had 100, you had a parcel that was 100 feet wide and you wanted to split it, you wouldn't be able to because the minimum lot width is 65. And if you have a larger lot in another district that you could split and said that I have a lot in the R1A or the R1E, which is your largest width, and I would like to split that to put in 3 small lots. You can't do it because the R1E has its minimum width. Okay, so that's one of the issues with where zoning has kind of complicated residential development, because it's a lot of, well, all the codes prescribe a certain lot width and a certain lot depth. And sometimes that prevents somebody from maybe building 2 separate houses on 2 separate lots because they can't meet that specific dimensional standard.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks for the presentation. You said that you covered the negative and the positive aspects of zoning. I heard the negative, I heard the word sprawl, cookie cutter. Tell me, in your opinion, what are the positive aspects of zoning?
I think the positive aspects of zoning are in the areas that necessarily aren't dimensional related. They're factors that you can include in the code that are more requirements for features in the community that provide better character. Landscaping requirements, for example. Some communities dictate smaller street width to increase walkability. There's not in the current code, but in the repealed code, there was a section in there that provided people the opportunity, if they wanted to provide bicycle parking for their businesses, they'd get an automatic reduction in how many parking spaces they had to provide. And to me, those are some of the positive aspects that zoning can bring to a community to make it more walkable, livable, greater context to community. Some of the negative aspects you heard, sprawl, large lots, kind of telling everybody you got to build the same square footage house, you got to have the same setbacks, got to have the same, front yard and rear yard. Some of those are the negative aspects that really remove or reduce the degree of innovation and design that can be incorporated into the community.
Thank you.
I think the other thing, Chip, is the repealed code had what was referred to as overlay districts that tried to advance some additional, like, for example, there was a downtown overlay that was really focused on the quality of the buildings, building materials, the transparency of the windows to try to get away from people making small windows on the first floor, to try to keep that historic look of the downtown. Those are those another example of a positive impact that zoning can have.
Great. Why don't we go to the audience, both on Zoom and in the room? Do you have any questions or ideas for John? Mark?
John, I was intrigued by your term of stacking, where, you know, more intense uses will allow less intense use. And my observation of that in action in Harbor Springs is that that there has been a lot of additional regulation and requirements imposed on any development, that once someone proposes more development in, say, a zone or a district that's permitted, that they run a real gauntlet of additional requirements and regulations and so on, that has effectively precluded new development and intense development in town because of objections. And that's why I think we're seeing this proliferation of mega McMansions in town, even though the districts might permit it. And even single family residences in the central business district. There are so many hurdles to developing a business in the central business district that we permit single family residents overseas.
Okay. Yes, sir, in the back.
When you were making your
Could you introduce
presentation.
yourself?
Oh, Doug Trozak, I 125 East Bay. Was there a special group that meets to make in the planning commission? What brings the special group into play? What triggers a special group? Special land use. Special land use. What, how does that work?
Special land, that's a good question. Special land use is a use that can go in a district, but there's an acknowledgement that its use could have an impact on the adjacent properties. Therefore, it has to go through a more thorough review by the planning commission and the adjacent neighborhoods to make sure that if it's approved, that those impacts are minimized, or even in some cases, there may not be any impacts, but it's kind of like putting a use through a kind of more of a magnifying glass to really take a look at it before it's approved. So that's a special land.
And that exists today?
Yes.
So the special land use is subject to the old rules
Yes,
and not the new rules?
it's in the current zoning code. Yes, the old.
Because the gentleman brought up a point where I bought on 125 a residence. And I bought it, there was no allowance for alcohol to be sold in the building. And then the special land use, 15 years later, I bought it in 2000, now it's 2025. And I've had 3 restaurants next door to me partying until 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was allowed by the special land use group here or in town. So the idea of redistricting or reorganizing, it gives government the opportunity to wiggle in there and make a change. So that the city of Harbor Springs can now make $25,000 every time a new restaurant goes in there. And they give the restaurant a new recreational license. So that's where the rubber meets the road with district or with what are we doing here?
Planning commission.
Whether it's the special, is the special group like 3 or 4 from this?
No,
it's not a group.
No.
It's a process.
It's a process.
If I can clarify, so it's a different type of use that's permitted, and it's a different process for approval. So if somebody comes to the planning commission and says, I want to open up a retail store within the central business district, they have to meet a certain set of standards in the zoning code. If somebody comes in and wants to open up, like in your case, example, a restaurant, that has historically been a special land use request. So there's an additional set of standards that is held to. It's still the same planning commission members that are reviewing that. It's just, it's a second level of review process with a second level of standards that are reviewed to make sure that they can minimize any impact that might have on other businesses in the area. And I do want to clarify something that you said. When a new restaurant comes into town, the city does not receive $25,000 for each new business that comes into town. We don't really get involved in liquor licenses at all. The only fee that a business pays to the city of Harbor Springs when coming into town, we have a merchant license that is $100 and we have a signage application that's $25. So we're not making thousands of dollars when new businesses come in.
Does that restaurant pay it directly to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission?
That would be my understanding. It's not something local with us.
And there's no approval through the city for that?
There was
the city was issued 5 recreational licenses.
No, we are not involved. The only thing that we get involved in is with certain types of liquor licenses, there needs to be a review and a recommendation from city council, I believe. I could be mistaken, on whether or not they're amenable to a license, but we don't get any money and we don't issue them. That's all through the Liquor Control Commission.
I stand correct?
Yeah. I would say if you wanted some further information, Victor, the city manager, would probably be the person that has more information on how that process works. So if you want more clarification, he would be a better source.
So if there's a change, there is no additional layer of government involved. It's still the same layer.
Yeah, the difference between a permitted use and a special use, it still all happens here at this table. It's just different standards come into play through the approval process and review.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so wrap up then our learning segment. Are there any other comments, questions, ideas that we're taking from this? All right. Thank you very much, John, for bringing that together. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, next thing on the agenda then is what we've been working up to for months and months and months, and that's to get ready to take a look at if the current zoning district configuration is ideal for Harbor Springs, or if there's a better configuration. And are you ready to do it? All right. Members of the audience, you have maps.
Just one quick question. This is the new zoning residential districts. I thought we were gonna work off the 2021 draft, starting from the old zoning.
We're gonna take a look at today's zoning districts, and we're gonna take a look at the repealed code, and we can.
But both drafts, it's just the meeting minutes, the package did not include both.
The package did, the map,
The agenda did not include
both maps.
both. It only included.
Oh, I see, yes, I get, you're right. Yeah, well, we agreed we were gonna work from the repealed code format, so I guess that's what we provided in the package. But Jeff has since printed maps, old and new, for members of the audience. All right, and then I have some worksheets. Linda, can you?
Yeah.
For the audience. Audrey, can I have one of those back?
Sure.
The two things up. Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Okay, planning commission members, do you have your worksheets? Audience members, you have your work, please. Project this.
That's my hat. Spin it around.
Okay. This is a summary, the most precise and accurate summary that we've had yet about the way that the districts in our existing zoning code were once mapped to the repealed zoning code. And so I thought what we could do, our quest to go ahead and look at the straw man by the end of this section for how we want to go forward, is just go line by line and see if we still agree. We talk about the background, the theory, advantages and disadvantages, and see if we can settle on some things. And I was going to propose starting with some easy ones, see if we can knock off some really easy ones. What do you think?
Yeah, I just want to ask the question based on how this is gonna work.
Yeah.
So you can see these 4 districts being melded into one district. It's kind of hard for me to grasp what that means without knowing what the permitted uses are gonna be in each of the, what they are in the 4 districts and what they're gonna be in the 1 district. So is there a benefit to having 4 districts still, because we're gonna have different permitted uses?
That's what I hope to talk about conceptually.
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, without,
Chairman, I think I can,
yeah,
and I could probably answer that. In the current zoning code, under the R1 includes R1, A, B, C, and E in the current code. And all of the permitted uses and all of the special land uses are all the same in all districts.
There is one difference. Again, through all the R1s, pretty much have all the same permitted uses. There is one difference, and that comes to guest quarters. In R1A and E, guest quarters are permitted by right. And in R1B and C, guest quarters are permitted through special land use. That was in the existing 2015 code.
Yeah. But it's the same bundle of uses in each of the districts.
Realistically, other than that one difference in the old code, the only difference between these districts for the R1s was the minimum lot sizes and the setbacks. Other than R2 permitted duplexes by right.
Right. My question is, for example, if you go from R2 to RN, R2 currently you have the ability to have a 2-family building. And if you go to RN, you may or may not, depending on what we decide on permitted uses. So it's kind of hard to decide if it makes sense to combine them or not, because of things like that.
Yeah. My thought on that, Chip, is let's come up with our straw man, and then when we get into uses, dimensions, and approvals in the next meeting or two, then we'll say, uh-oh, that doesn't make sense what we came up with on May 15th, so we need to change that. All right.
To Chip's point, kind of like we've done throughout the zoning code, we kind of like made a little note in sections to ourselves, or John's noted it, that, oh, we want to make sure and discuss whether we would have administrative review for this, et cetera. So, can we kind of parenthetically, if we were coming up with a consolidation of zones, but maybe someone had a concern about something, a permitted use or a by right use, that we can kind of note that, but move on. Is that what you're kind of talking about?
I mean, it's a little different to me than just what we're talking about parenthetically, what we've talked about before in the different articles. Because if I own a piece of property in R2 today, and I have the ability to build a 2-family building, and then all of a sudden it goes to residential neighborhood, and we decide for that entire bucket that it's only going to be for one house, then I've lost value by virtue of merging the districts. So I mean, we can't really. I mean, so for that reason, I would say we shouldn't merge them. And so I mean, it's like that's the problem I'm having.
One thing that we have the ability to do here, Chip, when we're looking at new districts, it inevitably, when you're making changes to the zoning code, we may, through this process, create a piece of property that has an existing nonconformity to some degree. And that's essentially what you're talking about. If we were to take the R2 district or a property that used to have 2 dwellings units allowable by right, and we move it to a district that's now 1, we've essentially created an existing nonconformity. We have language in the zoning code to address that and how we would treat that scenario. The other option that you have when doing this, and we have this language in our existing 2015 code, is you can pick a date and say, if you were compliant with the zoning code as of this date, regardless of whether you are now, you are considered to be conforming and not have any issues. And our date in the existing 2015 code is set at, I think it's January of 1990. So that's something that could be done as well. Is if we felt that we wanted to combine that and address that situation, what we could do is say, we're merging these 2 districts. R2 and R1 are now going to be together. The new standard is going to be this or that or whatever, what we determine for uses. But we could then say, any of these properties that are in these districts that had a use issue, we're going to just say you are conforming and you may continue that. Does that help?
I mean, that's with the property forever, that right.
Yeah, I mean, those are some ways of handling that situation if it ends up coming out that way.
That's
Great.
So Bill, if I'm understanding what you're suggesting correctly here, so if we basically say that these 4 districts, take the first example, are all under RN today. We understand how it migrated to RN, but we would annotate that there could be some concern about whether or not 2-family structure should be allowed in every district. That would be annotated and that would be addressed at, I guess, a later date.
Yeah, you know, if we get our strong man tonight, next couple meetings probably we'll work on uses, dimensions, and approvals.
Okay.
And that's the meat of it.
So just again, to kind of restate what my question is, that if we agree that these 4 districts, taking this first example, should be collapsed into RN, we're not agreeing that RN necessarily should include all districts that are RN should necessarily include 2-family by right.
Correct. Yeah, we haven't even opened the can about what uses are going to be allowed and dimensions.
Okay.
my problem with it is that, I like having fewer districts for sure. But now if we have a code, it says, we took it down to 1 district from 4, but yet the old 2-family still applies here, here, and here. I mean, are we improving the code or not?
That's the question. That's what we'll have to
I don't
figure
think we
out.
are. I mean, I think we're making more, we still have 17, syntax.
Yeah. Well,
So
I say let's try it. I'm going to suggest we start with at the bottom with some Jimmy's. And let's see what, let's kind of get the groove here.
That's a question, and I'm sorry, I'm Scott Cartwright, we're at 141 Bluff. What I'm really trying to understand, and I know we're late to the party, and whether we should sit around and wait for it. You're talking about building a straw man. I'm wondering, what is the driver, so we understand it?
Great,
What's the
thank you.
driver?
Thank you very much, Scott.
Okay.
So remember our goals?
Yep.
So here, I see this one fits right in, most importantly, with improve the clarity and usability for residents and staff. Okay, so we're gonna put a lot of restrictions on your property through zoning. A lot of restrictions on my property through zoning. I think the first duty of the city is to make sure that the regulations are clear and understandable. And that is the only acceptable form of regulation. How do other people feel about it?
I mean, I'm thinking what we're talking about doing is making it less clear. Yeah, it's all gonna be RN, but if you're RN and you used to be R2, then, now it's just R2.
Okay, I would say don't jump to the first.
I know, but I'm saying conceptually.
Okay,
yeah.
And so that's all I don't have an answer here about it, other than change it.
The thing that's making me nervous here is that when you talk about building a straw man, it's an evolution. So it makes people like me who are up here during the summer predominantly, I'm one of those people. And makes me wonder, Do I have to keep sitting in on meetings to make sure that strawman doesn't evolve into something that you're absolutely against? Or is it, obviously you're here and having anxiety about nothing? You know, that's the part where you're looking at it going, trying to get all this zoning down. When I asked the driver, I understand the convenience for the sake of clarity for everybody. But I've lived long enough to understand some of these things have other agendas. What's really driving it? What is it we want to get at? Is we're trying to increase density or we're not trying to increase density? Are we trying to hold density? People, that is. That's really the question, because as you said, Harbor Springs is pretty much built out.
Yeah.
So what are we trying to get to? And then I'll be at peace. You know, it's really just, what are we trying to go for here?
Scott, we don't know yet.
Okay.
The next 2 hours, we'll probably define that.
But I'm wondering, why is it taking the time for you guys to do the planning? It's clearly going somewhere, because otherwise you'd have dropped the issue, let it lay down and just live with it.
Okay, so let me restate where we've been all this year, just so that everybody's
I
clear.
get deeper, we've been reading, it's just like.
We identified a number of things in the existing zoning code that it is not sufficient. There are a bunch of deficiencies. There's actually risks and gaps that we identified. Planning Commission and the community have consensus that we need to do better. And the best place to start was with the format of the repealed zones. So here we are. And we've been working through article by article, word by word to get to this point. And we've made great progress. We've improved a ton of things in the text and some of the concepts there. And now here we are with the meat, and we're ready to get to work. And Chip, you know, we may say, holy crap, we did all this work and it's not better. So let's keep what we have in terms of the district.
To be clear, I like the new format. You know, I mean, for sure. That's not what we're talking about here.
Thank you.
No, yeah. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I also just build on that. Some examples of things that we have done by going through this process to this point. We found that even though the new format that we've been working with largely was lifting text from the existing current zoning code, it's been rewritten in a way that is easier to find things, for example. But in going through that, we found things such as antiquity language about building radio tower structures in your yard, or a potential that you could use shipping containers to build a house on Main Street or something like that. And we found that in going through those things, word by word, line by line, that there were some things that we didn't think were in the best interest of the master plan or the city people. And so the goal, as I see it, has been to say, account for what exists today that's approved and we're running to, build on a better format that was presented last year, and then make sure every ingredient of that is to the liking of the citizens. And we've opened up an awful lot of channels of communication, as you heard, to try to get it right. And this is the sticky one, because by going to the repealed code format, just format, forget about the metrics, format, it forces you to look at a list of what the proposed zone groupings were. And we're not buying that at all. Instead, we want to say, how do we want to end up with whatever is the best answer? And it could be exactly like what is in law today, the ordinance of today. It could vary. But what we found in going through it and studying and grinding through the details is there have been some things that we can improve. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
So yep, you gotta stay tuned for the next few weeks. Love to have you.
I can provide a little bit of thought on this, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I see it, you need separate zoning districts any place that you want separate regulations to apply. Obviously, we need separate group of regulations for the central business district than we do from, let's say, Lake Street above the bluff. So I think anytime where you see a situation where the same set of regulations won't work for this neighborhood in comparison with this other neighborhood. Like, I think a very clear example is waterfront properties versus non-waterfront properties. There's different, things that come into play that are important to the builders and what they're trying to capitalize on those two different types of properties. So that's a good indication of where you may want to have different conditions. And you may, through looking at this, find other examples of situations where we need a different set of regulations. Maybe you decide above the bluff should have some certain regulations versus below the bluff. Or Chibler, you were talking about duplexes. Maybe in this area, duplexes are by right, and in this other area, duplexes are special land use or not permitted. So I think that it's really hard to separate Article 2, which is the zoning map and the districts, from Article 3, which is where we're gonna get into those regulations. So I think we kind of have to, for this macro discussion, just kind of look at both to help determine what we're gonna create for districts before then at the next meeting, getting into more of the specifics for each district. Does that make sense, John, or is anything you want to add to that for the thoughts of how to proceed through tonight?
Yeah, I think. I understand where the chair wants to go relative to the kind of the broader 30,000 foot level. But I think in today's world, in today's context, zoning codes, the code needs to represent the policies and the goals of the community, because the zoning ordinance is the regulatory tool that's used to implement the master plan. And if the master plan has goals in it that say we want to increase the diversity of housing types so we can have young families and older families, multiple generations living in the same community, then the zoning ordinance then should reflect that as part of how it's codified. And I think we're right away, we kind of dive into the weeds. The weeds are, for example, this current discussion. Well, if we combined all these districts like we did into the residential neighborhood, well, how are we gonna manage duplexes and triplexes? You need to have the conversation first as a community. Do you want to allow somebody to have a duplex or a triplex in a neighborhood to provide different housing opportunities for a wider range of age groups? That's the first question. And if the community says no, we don't want duplexes, we don't want triplexes, we just want single family homes. Well, then you got to craft the ordinance and codify it that way. But I guess where I'm getting at is you got the master plan, you got the goals in the master plan. How are you going to the goal of the planning commission and the community is you input into the master plan, and now you got to figure out how to take those goals and codify them to make the master plan implementable. That's the challenge. So I like going through the district concept, but I think what the community is really grappling with is not the district names, not the dimensional requirements. I think the community here is really grappling with the idea of duplexes and triplexes. Do we want them? And if we want them, where should they go? And if we do want them, what kind of regulations are we going to weave around them as part of the review process? I think, if I'm not mistaken, I just really think that's really what is going on here. That's a big hammer. That's right. Big one.
Yeah, it's only about, we know there's about 5 or 6 issues that, have people concerned, but, and we'll get to those. We will absolutely get to those. We're going to come up with a fine resolution. But I would really like to see if we could come up with a straw man for the structure of the districts with details to be filled in at the next 2 meetings. And I think we can. And with your permission, planning commission, we could try, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these rows and see how far we can get it. If we run into trouble, then we'll change direction. Are you up for that?
Yeah, I'm up for that. I mean, another way, turning this a bit on its head, if we did Article 3 and we said, these are the permitted uses, or these are by right, these are special use, and it turns out that a bunch of the districts have exactly the same decisions that we make, then you can combine
Yes,
them.
we could.
I mean, if you could, why would you need to have different districts if they have exactly. the same.
Exactly right.
So, I mean, I don't know. That's one way of looking at it as well.
Okay.
I just, like, have a comment here. I think there's, I agree with where you'd like to go, and I support that. But I think there's danger in jumping it all to the right-hand side of that chart. I think, what the current code says is the left-hand side. Now, with all due respect to the planning commission and the work that you put in towards the code that was then repealed, I know that you had good, solid discussion and rhyme and reason to collapse it to the right, but the baseline is the left side. And I think that we should talk in terms of a straw man to say, is there any opportunity to collapse any of those? What do we lose? Or should we just keep it as, like in the first example, like keep 4?
Right.
Because we may lose something by going any less than 4 in that particular first one. I also support the idea of starting in an easier place than the top one. But I don't want to try to talk through justifying the right-hand side. I would propose that we instead talk about, is there any consolidation or perhaps growth to the number of zones, taking the left side as the baseline?
Great, yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that. And let's start with a couple of these. So let's start at the bottom of the community district. Don, can you tell us the purpose of a community district?
The community district was set up basically to represent all properties that are owned either by the local, county, state, or federal government. You have, for example, property that's owned by the city. You have property that's that's managed by the conservancy here in town. You have parks, city hall. So it's consolidating those type of non-exempt, exempt community uses into one district.
Including schools, right?
Schools. And schools.
Yep. And does everybody have a community district in their zoning?
No, some communities allow a lot of these uses in their R1, R2 districts. I always recommend having a special district for community so people can see where the community properties are and what they're using.
So we have one today. Sounds like John supports it. Just if you had to say today, do you think we ought to have a community district going forward?
Yes.
All right, we got one.
Oh, wait.
Whoa.
Public?
I don't know. So we've been running these meetings in a free-flowing, collaborative way over the last, 5 months. And right now, the planning commission has to get some stuff done. What do you think? Do you want to have public comment after each district?
I will.
All right.
Yeah, I don't see a problem.
Okay. Mark, make it.
Thank you,
Chris.
I'll do it as quickly as I can. Why? It's totally arbitrary. Like all the regulations in the code are arbitrary. What if the city decides they want to put low-income housing on some of their property? Why does it have to be zone community property? Why? Why?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not just you, but to everybody. Why do we have to have a community zone, like you say, John? And some communities don't. It's the whole town could be used as community stuff. If so we decided to build a school somewhere else, just because it's not community zone, can't we build it there? For a church?
Karen.
Karen Offield, I noticed today that a portion of our parks are not just community. They are a sort of a combination of WF and everything like that, but it might be something to refer to when you're talking about community.
Planning Commission, any thoughts? Remember, this is just a straw man. Yes, sir.
Doug Trozak on 125 East Bay, which on the current zoning map, I look over on what is called water. And then on the new zoning map, I look at what's called community. What's the difference between waterfront and community? And recently, the local bank didn't like looking at the marina and they wanted the marina moved in front of my Bay Street condo. What regulations, I mean, you call it the same, but is the waterfront different than community? There's one for each. And you're making that change, unless there's some blue that I'm not doing. Looks like the blue is.
All right, we haven't agreed to any changes. We're discussing conceptually, do we need a community district? And we're gonna get to, do we need a waterfront district? And we'll talk about what the characteristics and uses of that could be. And then we'll try to decide what the right answer is.
So I'm on hold. So there's a difference between community and waterfront because you're making that change. It's this language. Or
We're not making any changes yet. We haven't agreed to either. All right, planning commission members are gonna make some decisions. What's your gut reaction for our problem?
I have a question. The community as it's imagined is not land that's being taxed. Is that right? The city owns all the community property, is that correct?
Public schools.
Public schools do, city does, conservancies do.
Okay,
So it's not necessarily the city.
okay, thanks. Just looking for what are the true undebatable things that would make a community portion. That's not one of them.
And so I think I'd like to take kind of a convert or an opposite look at that. If we have a community district, then that defines what can't be built there as well, right? So we can't have, housing built in a community district. Isn't that what we want?
You haven't decided on the uses yet.
Right.
So at the time, depends what you guys decide the uses in community.
But yeah, if that's your vision, then you would,
Yeah.
it would argue towards having a community district.
Correct.
With its own separate rules.
Yeah, I think that's the point, is that if you want to provide for portions of the city that can perhaps be limited in terms of what can be developed out there, as you've suggested, then you designated a community district that would not allow housing development or shopping centers, whatever. And the use is yet to be determined, I believe. So I guess I would be supportive of community. Yes.
Also, within 50 years, we've had community and really zero issues have arisen. So you really can't kind of declare that for every single piece, obviously special use could come up where we can make changes, but other than that, we haven't had any issues with community, the old one or the new one. So my vote would be going forward with a community.
All right, let me see consensus. General, all right, let's have it in our straw man and make sure when we define the uses that it still makes sense.
And again, we can always make these changes as we're filling in the blanks that if it doesn't make sense, we can knock it out.
I think that's where everybody is struggling.
Yeah.
Is that because we are voting for community or any of these others, that we're getting locked, we're perceiving that we're getting locked into, right? And that's not what Bill is proposing, at least not what I understand.
I think just going forward to be able to fill in the blanks at the next phase of it.
Right.
All right, what about manufacturing? And what's the purpose of a manufacturing district?
Well, it's the intent is to accommodate manufacturing, storage, processing, contractor supply, and wholesale facilities. But in Harbor Springs, your manufacturing is primarily used for boat storage. And if you look on your map, the only area that you have for manufacturing is up in the northeast corner. And
then
North Central as well.
and north central, right in the middle. But those have been on the map and they haven't changed.
So what's your gut? Does it make sense to have a manufacturing district in ours?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so, but we're not talking about permitted uses, so, for example, if we thought, maybe multifamily housing in those manufacturing districts might make sense. So we're not,
It makes sense, but you're not gonna get financing from a bank to build multifamily in an.
so I
industrial
guess,
What you would need to do strategically is when you update your master plan, is to show your manufacturing areas as residential,
If we wanted.
if you wanted to.
right,
So then if somebody came into town and said, I'm gonna buy these lots over here on the northeast side and I wanna build some houses. Well, even though it's zoned M1, your master plan said your future vision is for residential. It gives you a good footing to go ahead and approve the zoning.
So
All right, sounded like people were generally in favor of having a manufacturer.
I'd like to propose changing the title to just industrial. Manufacturing has certain. It puts certain ideas in mind. Factory, what are we talking about here? Industrial, I think is a little bit more generic.
Okay, yeah, if we're working on the left side of the ledger, we're working with our existing definitions and existing district names.
So we can change it what we want.
Yeah, good.
Slaughterhouse.
All right, how do you guys like industrial?
I like it better.
Great. That's enough for me. All right, next I want to talk to you about waterfront and waterfront one in our current definition. Could you maybe show the current zoning map?
Yes, I absolutely can.
And maybe Jeff, could you tell us about waterfront and waterfront one? And we need to decide, does it make sense to have two micro districts with few differences?
Maybe. Find out what these small differences are.
Yeah.
Okay, so that.
Just to the far right of the Zoom bar, when you're on.
Yeah,
the
lower
window.
right is
The far
expand.
right.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. I don't know why I had troubles with that.
Yeah, so why do we have waterfront and waterfront one today, Jeff? What are the advantages of that and why is that ideal for Harbor Springs?
Well, I can't tell you why it's ideal. I don't know that it is, but basically it comes down to, I believe that we had some slightly different regulations between waterfront and waterfront one. You can see waterfront on the map here, and then waterfront one. And then realistically, we also had R1A, which is primarily waterfront on Glen Drive and.
Yep. I'm just calling the question, for the planning commission. Do you think it makes sense to have two districts with very similar uses? Let's identify, and if we can combine those two, do you think that would be desirable?
In my opinion, yes.
In my opinion, no, unless we know exactly what the uses are today and tomorrow. I mean, there may be bigger differences than I would agree to.
Yeah, I've been poring over the wording and,
So today, what is waterfront one? Is that?
It's residential.
Is it a residential, is it rented out or is it simply residential?
No, it's just residential.
So it's a residential set, and I've seen the buildings, so it's a residential group of buildings within the waterfront district.
Correct.
Okay.
Would you see any reason why those couldn't be
So I
combined?
think we should put those together, and then when we're going through and filling out the pieces, we can determine whether it makes sense to combine them or not.
Okay. So it'd be our wish to combine those two, if it makes sense. Let me see some more heads nod on that one. From the zoning.
So we'll cut
Master Mark.
Are we saying that WF1, which is residential, that we're gonna combine that in with all the rest of the waterfront?
Yeah. Could those two districts be combined if we think it makes sense? What's our?
I don't think this residential one's not, I don't know.
Right, but I will, if I can chime in here and clarify a couple things. So right now in our existing zoning code, when we're talking about waterfront, I think we need to talk about 3 different districts. We need to talk about R1A, R1A and R1E, which are the residential properties along Glen Drive and out on Delwood Lane that are waterfront. And then we have WF1, which is waterfront 1, which is again residential properties. And then for commercial waterfront, we have the WF district. So yes, there's a difference between waterfront 1 and waterfront. When we're looking at the right-hand column, we separated them and we had combined R1A and R1E into residential waterfront. And I guess this is something that we did miss before. Bill and I were going over this before we made this. WF1 waterfront resort should have been moved up with R1A and R1E being merged in with residential waterfront.
And they're definitely gonna have different setback requirements, et cetera, so, but they'll be non-conforming.
Do we need different setbacks for those properties than the other properties?
I mean, for sure, they're different. Those boathouses are much smaller, don't have any setbacks to speak of compared to the estates or R1A. So they will be different. I mean, if we want to have a footnote, or that's the preference, but they will be different.
They will also likely require the shoreline protection that was mentioned in the overlay of the repealed code. Where that would apply, maybe not to all, but to some of those properties in those areas, correct?
Yeah, shoreline protection, I think, is a whole nother issue. We should get into that when we get into the overlay districts, and that's certainly one that we will need. That's something that really FEMA is probably gonna say, you shall do this.
I'm all for it. I'm just thinking that also is a justification for why residential waterfront has some uniqueness to it.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say is the WF1 properties down there at the west end of Bay Street. I think if we looked at aerials, they're probably not in compliance with their existing setbacks anyway. So I think no matter what we do, they probably have existing nonconformities now. They're probably gonna end up with existing nonconformities after, but we can certainly look at that and make sure that we take that into consideration. One way or the other.
Are you suggesting putting WF1 up into the R codes and then maybe just add it? Maybe we're not getting rid of a district, we're just kind of putting it into a different group right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll talk about waterfront and can talk about the transition too, but combining that into water, that's what you're suggesting.
I think one of the big things here between, like, for R1A, R1E, WF1, one of the big differences between waterfront and non-waterfront properties is, non-waterfront properties clearly have a front yard and a rear yard. Waterfront properties are viewed much differently. I think if you asked somebody that owns waterfront property, where's your front yard, they would probably state the water side. But in reality, the way that most codes are worded, your front yard is the side that faces the street. So realistically, your rear yard is your waterfront side. And making sure that we have clear distinctions of how the rear yard can be used in waterfront versus non-waterfront. I think a good example of where the zoning code needs to show that difference is in a normal residential district, we don't want the garage to be closer to the street than the home. That generally they're set back behind the home. But if we set a garage behind a waterfront home, now it's between the home and the water. So in the waterfront district, we typically have different rules that garages can be put in the front yard, which is really, they view as their backyard.
Okay, let me see if I can restate what we
Sorry.
learned.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We think there's an opportunity to take the WF1 and take those properties and put them into some residential district, sounded like. And so maybe we don't need a WF1 district separately.
Yes.
Okay, for a straw man, is it worth proceeding?
I would agree with that, and I would also strongly support that it WF1. But WF1 should not be included with WF.
I agree, WF1 should not be included with WF. I think it should be an additional, its own district with the other waterfront estate, waterfront.
R1A.
Residential.
R1A.
Okay,
I'm not in favor of eliminating the district.
well, I think we just
Just moved it up.
But you're incorporating it with R1A and R1E.
potentially.
Yeah.
That's a place, put in the R1.
It's just a placeholder for right now. We're just getting it out of one.
Okay, great.
So you. What was this other mention of TR?
Yeah.
Property.
Yeah.
Aside.
Let's talk about that, because our TR district right now, pardon my French, I think it's kind of a hot mess. We have the same district for a mix of residential and very light commercial that are along Bay Street. But then we have those same regulations for a TR district that is a parking lot for the IGA. We have the same zoning district of TR for a parking lot that's adjacent to the condominiums at the end of Bay on Hankey. So TR has kind of been we don't know where to throw this, so let's just throw it in TR. And I think that that's something that we need to clean up in one way or another. And so on this, you'll see that TR has been merged with several different zoning districts. Some have been merged in, or were proposed to be merged in the 2024 code with CBD. Some were proposed to be merged in with residential, and it just kind of depended on where they were. So it's a tough one. Some of them, I think it's very clear, like the parking lot for the IGA should probably be the same zoning district as the IGA. I think that makes sense to me. Looking at some of the other uses that are around them and maybe changing some of them to, some use that can, is similar in nature to them. I think TR is, some of the properties, I think it's fairly clear what should be done with them. Some of the other properties probably deserve a little bit more of a discussion.
Well, taking it from the bottom though, transit, this one we're talking about is the condos at Haney and Bay. And so I'm not saying get rid of the transitional residential, I'm saying just make that piece of property. Why wouldn't we make that like
RM.
residential?
RM.
Yeah.
Part of RM, yeah.
Bill, could I make a very brief comment?
Sure, Mark.
As somebody who's watched this process over many, many days. The districts, when they were first instituted and have modified slightly, are basically a catalog of what took place on those properties at the time of the institution of the code. And so they reflect what was happening on those properties. That doesn't bear, in my mind, relationship to what should go on those properties down the road in the future. And that's why I say that the districts are very arbitrary and should follow the master plan versus what was here in 1950 necessarily. So I think that we need, and this transitional, I remember when they instituted TR, because they didn't know what to do with the alley behind the New York. And they said, well, let's just call it between there and the park. Well, let's just call it transitional residential. And so they created the TR district.
Yep. All right. So it sounds like we have, I'm sorry, which TR property is this, Jeff? Identify that on.
Which Which one would you like me to look
The
at?
one that's with the waterfront and waterfront resort.
Or Haney and
I thought we were talking about TR, the one at the.
Yes,
Hanky.
yes,
Yeah.
the TR that's on
By
the
the-
north side of Bay. There's one property north side of Bay.
Well, that's one of the properties that.
Yeah.
That's the one we're.
right there,
But
right
that's
there.
the one we're looking.
So you've got, yes, you've got the public beach right here, you've got Bay Street that continues past that, and then you turn on Hankey Street to come back up to Traverse. There's the condominium project right there. There's a line of parking on the side of the road, and that parking lot is TR.
What's the parking lot? Not the- not the-
Parking lot.
It's just the parking lot. That parcel. And then Mark Rondell mentioned here's Zoll Street or the Zorn Park, thank you. Losing my mind. You've got Zorn Park here and we have that alley that's behind the New York. We've got a couple of residential properties and it's zoned TR.
Any of these parking lots, can we mix into community or that wouldn't fit?
I think that's private.
They're all-
I think this parking lot here is private and it's part of. Is it part of the condo there or is it part of the club?
With improvements to the parking lot.
But no, it's city property. They wanted to lease it and extend it.
Because of the road.
That was some parking on the other side of the road.
Oh,
I'm not sure what ended up happening there. I know we did some agreements with parking.
all right, so it sounds like we want to,
It's
it makes sense to get that out of there, whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
Put it somewhere more.
So just a question,
Yeah.
and to, Mark Rondell's point, today they are parking areas.
Well, that one is.
That one is, but also the one up at Harbor Market, et cetera, et cetera. There are other, but then there are others that are not parking areas.
Right, for instance, we have Gardner Street here within the Central Business District coming down. And then we have about 10 or so parcels on Bay Street here that are a mix of, there's some single family residential homes, there's a duplex, there's a kind of a bed and breakfast that I think may have been converted to a home. Then we also have the yacht club and some other light commercial kind of things.
Formerly a home, but now a business.
Right. Farther down towards the other end of Bay Street, we have some properties here that are TR, which realistically, I think most of those are storage for Wallstrom's. They've got their main mechanical building here, and then they've got some boat storage and dock storage of equipment. That's what that's used for.
I like TR is about 4 or 5 different things.
Yeah, but I think that TR and why there was talk of putting that TR in the waterfront is let's say that Little Traverse decided that, you know what, they just didn't need a parking lot anymore. People aren't,
Little Harbor. Club?
Little Harbor Club, thank you. They just didn't need a parking lot anymore. So maybe that could become homes. And then if it did become homes, they would be waterfront.
I'm making an educated guess here. I think the idea of the transitional residential district was parcels that they weren't sure what direction they were gonna go. It could go more commercial, it could go more residential. And so they just kind of said, we'll put it in this mixed development, you know, that will have a little bit of uses of each. And then as they develop, we'll shift them into one or the other, depending on what direction they go.
These, I don't have it memorized, but in the TR district, intent is that recognizes that residential can go to commercial and commercial can go to residential. And like Jeff said, there wasn't really any clear objective. They just said, we don't know what to do with it, so we're gonna put it in a TR district.
And I think from having been there at the time.
If
At the time.
the past
At the
matters,
time, pardon?
if the past matters, you know, we're trying to make a
Okay.
decision about what to
At the
do.
time, it was stated that this is probably going to go to CBD. It's probably going to go transition. There was a big Quonset hut right behind the New York. That was a manufacturing or some sort of a wartime storage. But whatever, That it was thought that then that would go between there and the park and become part of the CBD and develop more as a commercial activity. That was the talk at the time.
Okay, Carter, you have.
What time period was that?
Pardon me?
I was trying to understand more. What time period?
Late 1970s. It wasn't when it was first in 1974, 6, but it was late 1970s or very, very early 1980s.
That TR was created
Yes,
and you were present during those meetings?
I was at those meetings, yes.
I worry that if we kind of move them into something that's gonna devalue what the property owner is.
I agree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But let me just ask you, conceptually, do we like the idea of having a TR district? Or is it just such a hodgepodge and there's no common thread?
I think maybe
That there
having.
might be a better home for each of these properties.
I think maybe having a bucket district for, because I think we're gonna run into probably others that may qualify into some kind of. I don't know.
Okay,
If I may, I think that the TR district is a little bit different than the other ones. I would say, I would suggest when looking at the TR district, don't look at it as a whole district. I would suggest looking at each individual parcel and deciding what district that parcel should go into, as opposed to the district as
I
a
think the TR district by the Little Harbor Club should be waterfront. Like-
Right.
Let me put some context. I'll just ask a rhetorical question.
all right.
Does your master plan, future land use map on your master plan have a district that is, we don't know what to do, so we're gonna have this under district?
Okay, good question.
Okay, so if it doesn't, you need to follow your master.
I can pull up the future land use map from the master plan if we'd like to look at that.
No, we got, I got John's point. Yeah, Carter.
Sorry, I live in this district
Yeah.
and you're about to hit a third rate, so. I have asked and looked at how that future land use map went, and I recall roughly when it was modified, and there was really no discussion. It really dealt with the desire around the DDA. There was no material discussion to expand that. In the middle of that, those are homes with one business. So a shift to that to the CBD completely changes that to zero setback. And you will, you're just picking a battle that you can pick it if you want. I just don't think it's productive. It would completely change that area from those current homes.
I think there might
Talked
be,
about before.
I think there might be a better solution.
I like Jeff's suggestion, let's do each little PR piece of property and
Exactly.
deal with it.
And as we move up.
So the one
list,
by the Little Harbor Club, let's make it waterfront.
Great. Great, so our intent is let's get rid of a TR district and let's put these properties.
TR parcel,
Each one.
each one.
Great,
So, yeah.
all right, great.
It's not on the water.
It's not on the water.
And it's owned by the Little Harbor Club, which is on the water.
Yeah. Part of the city.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to go and deal those out? Want to make that? Let's do it.
We're gonna tackle all the TRs.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
let's do everything but Carter's neighborhood. And then let's come back to the.
Let's do the easy ones first,
Yeah.
right? So for instance, we have the parking lot by Hankey Street.
Yankee Street, right, where you want to make.
Do we dump that in with RM? Or do we dump that in with the across the street from it?
I would say across the street from it, because it's owned by the Little Harbor Club, which is all waterfront.
So waterfront commercial?
Isn't
waterfront.
part of it city property? I'm not sure, Jeff, but I
Okay.
remember when we were
I think it
okay.
is.
I think part of it's city.
Part of it is
property.
city because they had the road, because the city owns the road. They wanted to extend the parking lot. They couldn't extend it
part of it is
without
city.
the city saying okay, because the parking spots were clearly in part of the city's property.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
All
All right, should we just figure waterfront for our straw
Well,
man? We're coming back on all these.
We can come back on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's jump above the bluff real quick.
Good.
We've got we've got a residential house on the south side of Harbor Car Care that is owned by Harbor Car Care. Harbor Car Care is B2. And the residential house that is owned by Harbor Car Care, I think that maybe park some cars there or something, is in the TR district. would you like to see that moved in with B2 or the same zoning of whatever Harbor Car Care becomes? Or R1C in the same zone as the other residential properties below it?
If they decide to sell that house and someone buys it, they're not gonna use it for car storage. They would use it for a home to live in, right?
If that happened.
Yeah.
Or Harbor Car Care might want to expand the size of their business to incorporate that property.
Do they have a special land use on it today that would enable it to happen?
I don't know, I would have to, I think I remember seeing that there was something, but I don't know. And I could look that up.
On the proposed map. It was, the TR district there was gonna be the same zoning as the business district.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
our original proposal when we were looking at this in 2024 was to move it in with B2. We can come back to that if we need to.
Okay, placeholder B2. Or business above the bluff, whatever that's gonna be called.
Another TR district we have is the parking lot for the IGA.
I don't.
B2.
Yeah,
I think,
Boat and dock.
and then we have the boat and dock storage area of Wallstrom. I think this is where maybe. Yeah,
What's to the west of that TR?
this,
Yeah,
waterfront.
Wallstrom.
that is Wallstrom Marine. Yep, they have their, most of their commercial operation on this side, and then they have kind of a workshop building back here. And then on the east side of the property, there's some boat storage and dock storage.
Yeah.
Where they first dock.
There's also one, there's a house.
Yeah,
There's our home in there.
There's a house that's on.
Was in your hand.
It's surrounded, yeah. It's that little
This-
three houses.
Does Wallstrom own that?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, metal data or data brothers.
All right, John, Michelangelo, if you had to pick a district for that, which is dock and boat storage mostly, and a house. Would you give a recommendation?
Central and the, boat storage in with Wallstrom's?
Good, it'd be a little sliver.
No. I mean, it would just expand.
I don't know which side of it.
Oh, RM is multiple.
But that's multiple.
Yeah, that's.
This
This is a
single
single
house.
family.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, John, give us a solution here.
I think when we looked at the map in 2004, we decided to make it waterfront. Because we looked at the use, it's being used for boat storage. The house really is incidental to what's going on there. So we said, you know, it's owned by Wallstrom's, their waterfront business. They're using it for boat storage. Make it waterfront.
Because the Wallstrom's isn't owning the house.
No.
So there is a person that owns that home and lives in it.
Yeah,
But-
it's.
But it's right in the middle.
It does, it's literally right in the middle of it.
Do they have property on it? So is the house built on Wallstrom?
No.
How's that work?
So you got.
You're in there. They're surrounded by Wallstrom's.
That's the house.
Well, right next to it.
Okay, so we gotta take care of the people in their house, so let's call it, it's not residential district.
Property then it's residential.
Okay, Jeff, we just decided that most of that TR property is gonna become waterfront, except for the home that will be in some residential district, probably.
So
Today's
this,
our-
this long, tall one farthest to the east, isn't that owned by
That's owned by
the
Marina
condos
Village.
right here?
Yeah, that's owned by Marina Village Yacht Basin Association, the one right next to the residential. Those two parcels are adjoining and so they're surrounded, they're peninsula and Wallstrom property.
They're literally surrounded by Wallstrom's.
Well, they do connect back to the R2 on Main Street. So you could take those two parcels and make them R2 and then make the other ones waterfront. I don't know.
The church is there, the Baptist church.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you just keep it all.
Waterfront.
keep it all waterfront there,
Water.
there's a home there and there, they can
Mention that.
go on and be happy.
So that leaves,
All right, let's assume it's gonna be waterfront and let's make sure we take care of those people when we get to the details.
Make more too, or.
Make sure they're not hurt somehow.
That's right. We need to respect the homeowner.
Yep, okay,
That leaves the 8 to 10 parcels along Bay Street that are surrounded by CBD behind them and waterfront below them.
all right. Been thinking a lot about this one.
Industrial.
That-
Industrial.
Part of it, I'm thinking about it too. a little bit. We're talking about your neighborhood. Is there a solution that would have those beautiful homes in the yacht club not be in the central business district? More in a residential flavored zone, something that would have setbacks.
That's, yeah,
And is there some similarity to the area on Third Street? Where people were concerned about that being swept into the CBD with no setbacks? Is there enough commonality to make some kind of a new district
B1.
like that? John, what do you have any thoughts on a mixed use district or something like that?
Are you talking, when you say Third Street, you're referring to, excuse me, B1?
I think he is, yeah.
Yeah.
The north side of Third Street where we have some commercial, where there are already commercial properties.
Yes.
B1 and B2,
Okay.
but there are also some mixed residential homes within those areas as
Right.
well.
And people were concerned if that became CBD, that there's no setbacks, CBD by definition. That would, somebody could, tear down existing structures and build wall to wall there. Which could be fine, or it may not be fine.
And just for perspective and clarity here, they were proposed to be central business district in the now repealed code because that matched the future land use map in Must. Okay. Not saying we have to follow that, but that's how it ended up. Okay.
I think we also had some property owners within those B1 and B2 districts that came in and felt that they were too limited for what they could do with their property in comparison to some of the commercial properties right on the other side of the road. And so they asked for, more options for what they could do, which was another reason why we made that.
I can see that for B1 and B2. I think the TR on Bay Street is, in my mind, a different situation.
Bill. Make that B1. Yeah. You have anybody in the audience who? Maybe I want to talk about B1.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking to Carter. You're the chair.
About B1 and.
About the transition.
Those,
We're talking about making that potentially a residential.
or doing something with those 8 or 9 properties that is more residential flavor. And is there a commonality with some of that property on Third Street, on the north side of Third Street, to make a single district out of it? But I guess the first priority is, what about those 9 properties? What would we call them if we had a choice again?
Well, I think that there's sort of a disconnect between those two sets of properties.
Okay.
Very much so.
I really do think that the TR, where Carter is and everything, is pretty much residential. And so I sort of feel that it should be a residential zone, but with the existing non-conformity of the yacht club, I think it'd be that simple. On the others, up on the other one, up on Third Street, that is, B1 is being used as a transition zoning right now, where it can go either way. People, there's both there, they have the options.
Yes.
Right now existing, so that sort of is sort of working the way it's supposed to, with the exception that it's not, you can increase the intensity of the use by setbacks. Those can be adjusted to some degree, because if the goal is one of the overall goals is to create more housing, the only way we can do that, because everything is built out, is you have to adjust, you have to increase buildable areas, either by reducing setbacks or by adding storage or something like that. But I do think, though, down along where the houses are, and maybe someday that would change to something else, but I think for the foreseeable future, that's pretty residential.
So, planning commission details to be worked out. Do you generally favor moving those 8 or 9 or 10 properties into something with a residential flavor?
Yes.
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 Bill,
Public comment?
you asked for,
Please,
Go ahead, John.
good comments.
Oh, Mark.
thank you. All right, I think this is an excellent point to start to grapple with some of the critical factors that are here. One of the shortcomings that I feel very strongly about in the master plan is the lack of focus on our central core city. And I think that it's very important. These transitional residentials, I don't remember exactly when they came in, because I think they came in at a different time than the initial. But they were done that as spot zoning because that was the existing use of those properties. What we're talking about now is developing a vision for the future. And if what we want to do in the future is retain the core centrality of the city of Harbor Springs, we have to encourage that. We need to develop our code and our implementation so that it supports growth in the central core of the city of Harbor Springs. And by taking these transitional residential and making them residential, that's not doing it. I think that those new homes on the corner there should be a clarion call to this city to say, hey, why are we doing this to our central core that's supposed to be the main focus of the community? And this is an opportunity to grapple.
All right, let's explore that idea. I can't recall in the master plan that we say that we want to grow the central business.
I say, I think it's a shortcoming.
Okay. Planning commission, do you feel that we ought to have a focus moving towards business uses there, or?
I don't think we should grow the central business district because the existing central business district is empty a lot of the time. It's not fully utilized. Why grow it?
Let me. We have to talk planning policy. I think one of the reasons why you say, let's not grow the central business district. I'm assuming you're saying it has vacancies. Part of the reason why it has vacancies is because 68% of your housing units are seasonal. And the downtown can't support it. So there's that issue. If you wanna have year-round housing residents, they'll help support the businesses downtown. I mean, that's what you're getting at, Chip, is a result of how the community is changed from year-round to season. Because it can't, the businesses can't support themselves on four months of revenue. I mean, simply put. Now, my recommendation, I've been Bill's asked me several times to take a look at how we can work something out with the TR and the B1. I think there's opportunities on the B1 area to be more creative and provide better building in the future, building footprints. If the B1 area was part of the CBD, because I think the people in the B1 area don't have the same opportunities as the CBD does. Now, the TR district, that's part of the historical context of the community, those houses. You have to make a decision. Do you want those houses torn down and part of the CBD, or you want to protect them? If you want to protect them as part of the historical character, then move them into if you have a waterfront residential, and move them into waterfront residential.
Great.
But those are the policy decisions that then you codify. So that's really the decision.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I would say, based on the architectural style of the houses, because they're, they've been there a long time. They're part of what people think of Harbor Springs. Personally, if I were in your shoes, I would make sure that I protect those in the future.
Absolutely.
Yep. I support that position.
even though the master plan says it should be CBD. I think that was the wrong, personally, from a professional planning, I think that was the wrong call. In the master plan is to have those houses classified as something business.
How do the folks that live there feel about CBD surrounding them on all sides?
Can't speak for all of them. I think that the concern was, losing setbacks. That they're just because of what was done on the corner, that we'd be living in our homes and all of a sudden the setbacks and we'd have 3-story houses. So, I don't know if this helps. If you look at the master plan, it says 0 about why that's CBD. The only reason it was extended to CBD was in the map. There's no commentary in the master plan as to why. And the people who wrote the master plan at the time, most of them, several of them said, we never really talked about it that much. At least they said that. So it just was, I'm not sure what the logic was for the maps. The other thing that went on around that time, we had that community 2010, we had that community effort where there was a visioning. My recollection from that conversation was there was a desire on heights, because it relates to height too. This is that the height discussion was try to keep the heights in line with going up in the bluff. So the idea about 3 stories was, that conversation was 3 stories on Third, not on bluff, not on Bay. The idea was the buildings would get taller as you went back. And that sort of got converged more recently into 3 stories everywhere. So I think there's, if you go back through some of that history in 2010, I think that was 2010, and some of the conversations about heights, it sort of integrates. But the answer on the TR is, I think it's setbacks and then all of a sudden getting a 3-story building right next to you, and it just sort of, that's where I think
That's on the corner of Bay and Judd.
That's the.
That's the,
That's CBD.
and that's CBG.
That's the Shea House.
Yeah. Verifiably historic.
But that's historic, that's designated historic.
Right.
Yeah, that's just a weird.
Chairman, I'd like to just follow up on John's comment. In the master plan, it also said to preserve the character of the city and, quite a bit of wording around that. And before the yacht club was a yacht club, it was a home. And that whole strip was premium homes. And so I agree with John's suggestion that they should, instead of going CBD, they should be restored as residential, premium residential as part of the character in support of the town.
All right, so straw man, sounds like we're favoring putting those properties into some residential district to be named just for the straw man. Okay, so doing that, we've just eliminated the need for the existing TR district. We've just taken every single part of it and have a concept to move them to some better homes. All right, and we better, we're making good progress. Why don't we go to Zoom? Looks like we have 2 people with hands up.
Consuela, if you would like to speak.
Okay,
Move on.
let's go to. I just asked her to unmute.
Patricia, if you'd like.
This is Seth. Can I talk?
Go ahead. Yep.
This is Seth Pierpont. And we live 461, 463, 461 and a half, and properties across the street of Glen Drive. Controlling in the family somewhere between 2 and 4 acres on Glen Drive on the lakefront, as well as in the interior, whatever you'd call it, the circle. I keep coming back to the fact that the proposed R1 zoning is 0 to 4 residential units per acre. We like the notion of the R1A zoning, which is 1 residential unit. And the issue is that the actual owners of this property, of this 2 to 4 acres, depending on which family members are involved, is between 13 and 18 people. And because it's not us adults, it's the fact that we're passing this land to our grandchildren. And it's very likely that a majority of those, I'm sorry?
Well, Mr. Pierpont, we're not talking about this district or this area quite yet. And I think your comments could be more useful to us when we get to the residential areas. Would you be willing to stay with us?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We also have Patricia on Zoom.
Hi, Patricia Lang, 120, I own the house at 121 West Main that is zone transitional. And, I'm on Zoom, so I don't know who's speaking per se, but I would like to applaud the person who's speaking in behalf of the transitional homes on Bay, and hopefully the feeling will be the same for my home and the one on Bay Street behind me. Preserving the historical character and essence of Harbor Springs should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. To destroy any of these homes is an absolute crime. You are killing the beauty of your city if you allow it.
Ma'am,
And you're talking 10 homes. We're talking 10 homes.
Ma'am, how do you see these homes being destroyed?
May I finish?
Sure.
So you're talking 10 homes and you're trying to say, we need homes for people. I mean, you're talking 10 homes. How many people can you cram in there? And if you think people are going to buy those properties and live in them year round, you've got another thing coming. Surprise, surprise. Yes, I agree. You do want to build up the population of the city, but in the process of thinking about that and planning for it, do not destroy what makes Harbor Springs Harbor Springs.
Okay, thank you. Let's confirm that Planning Commission is not in favor of destroying any homes on Bay Street. All right, ma'am, we are all nodding. We are not in favor of destroying homes.
Well, the thing is, if you
ma'am.
classify them as CBD.
No, we're off that idea. We're moving on to
Okay.
a different solution. I think you're gonna like it. So, and now I'm moving on to Wendy.
120 and 188 East Main Street. As a business owner, it's a total, just to reiterate where we're going here, it's a total waste of that property to spend it on a business. I'm working, I can't enjoy my waterfront view. I can't afford the taxes that you'll have to charge me to operate a business in that spot. It's a better use of a residential property for somebody who can afford the view and pay for it.
And what property is that, Wendy?
I'm talking about the transitional.
Okay.
Carter is.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, well, in terms of our straw man, we have concurrence that we would move those 9 or 10 homes on Bay Street into some residential district to be named later. And they would not be part of the central business district anymore. Okay, which means that we don't need a transitional residential district. We've found a home for every single piece of that. Yes, here.
In my list about the parks, looks like Zorn Beach is TR, Josephine Park, Ford Park is TR.
No.
No.
It says Ross. So
I would think that's wrong.
Child's Park might be TR.
I think it's, I think, if you look at the colors.
Okay, so that
I
might be.
think it's community, they're very close to each other.
All right, sorry, thank you.
They're almost the same color.
That's the one she was talking about, but I'll give the address.
Oh, all right. Well, then let's talk about that property, Jeff. Can you? Yep.
Yeah. She owns the T in the TR on this piece right here between Main Street and Bay. There's that little alley right to the, on the east side of Zorn.
Yep.
And there's 2 or 3 homes that are right along that alley, and she is the one on the corner of Main and the alley.
Okay. Next to a community. All right.
And so, her property is either a duplex or a triplex. I'm not sure exactly which, and then there's a single family home on the other property, I believe. But they are basically both used for residential purposes.
Planning commission with your preference on something like that.
That should be residential.
Some form of residential.
Yeah.
It's a duplex, correct?
It is a duplex.
Yeah, it's the one with a perennial.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just past Harbor ice cream.
Historically known as Jim Rowe's mother's.
All right, so it's multifamily today?
It's also an alleyway, right?
Is it?
Yeah,
And
it's
is it
not a,
public? Is it a public alleyway?
it is a public alley, but it is just an alley, I believe. It's not a named street.
So it's city property.
But it's city property.
The alley?
Yeah.
Well, it's an alley.
But it's.
Right. But there's a difference between city-owned property and right-of-way.
Right, yes. An alley and a street are not zoned.
So
Right.
that isn't zoned, but hers is some type of residential. I mean,
It walks like a duck.
Make it some flavor of multifamily or R2 or something. Okay. All right. I think that's it.
That's it.
All right, so we did just eliminate a zoning district conceptually here. Good. I would like to talk about B1 and B2. Why do we have 2 zoning districts right next to each other with similar feel and flavor? And is that something we want? Is that?
That's the history. Why do we do it like that?
Can I just, for clarification, we talking about B1 and B2 below the bluff? Or are we
Yes, oh,
including
thank you.
B2 above the bluff?
B1 and B2 below the bluff.
Thank you. I don't understand why we have 2 similar zoning districts next to each other.
So I'll zoom in on the map here so we can get a better look at this.
That small batch, I think.
Like small batch. Yeah.
B2. Where's it at?
Decorator and different place there. So we're looking at stuff on the north side of Third Street. There's a couple properties on the east side of State, which is there's the city parking lot right on the corner, and then there's the little, geez, what's there now?
That'd be the west side.
West side, sorry, you're right. Well, we're on the other side of the street there. There's there was the sandwich place there.
Mhm.
Which for some reason my brain is going back.
Interior
to
design.
It's bakery.
Is that
It's empty now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then right on the corner, of course, there's a couple of businesses here. There's 1 or 2 businesses here. This is kind of parking lot.
Yep.
On this corner, we have the
Legion.
Legion. There is a residential home. There's some other businesses along here. Primary difference between B1 and B2 is just what uses are permitted. When we look at the uses for the central business district, we have a somewhat limited group. When we expand to B1, it says everything allowed within the CBD and a couple more uses. And then when we go to B2, it's everything allowed in B1 plus a couple more uses. The one difference, even though they have expanded uses that can be there, B1 and B2 do have setbacks where the CBD does not.
What do you see here, John?
Well, if you take a look at the lot configurations, there's not a lot of difference between the lot sizes and configurations between B1, B2, and CBD. You know, I think Jeff says that the uses in the CBD are a little bit less restrictive. You have the ability to look at those down the road. But to me, it makes sense having the B1, B2 just part of the central business district. I mean, you have 3 commercial districts at one intersection.
He was saying that the CBD is more restrictive than the B1, B2.
That's what Jeff is saying, but when you get into
Right.
the regulated use discussion, you can open some of that up. But when you take a look at Maine, you look at the one intersection, you have three business districts within one intersection. This is where, like I said, zoning, they started putting everything in neat little buckets. And this is what you end up with.
It's kind of a messy bucket.
It is.
So Jeff, I heard one important comment though, that in B1 and B2, there are setbacks.
Yeah, but that's actually the property owners, when we were discussing this before and even since, a lot of the property owners on the north side of Third have expressed that those setbacks are an issue for them. In the conversations I've had, that, you know, if you look at Third Street on the south side of the road, they can build lot line to lot line, they can build right up to the sidewalk, they can do those things. And with the limitations on the north side of Third, having that setback where they have to be back a certain distance away from the sidewalk creates a limitation that is preventing them from having the same amount of foot traffic that other areas within the CBD has. And so a lot of property owners, I guess not a lot, but several property owners that have come in to talk to me about it were highly encouraged that we had modified them and included them within the CBD so that they could get rid of those setbacks and be able to build in a better style that fit within the character of the rest of downtown.
Jeff, what is an example of something that would be permitted in B1 and B2, but not in the CBD?
I can't think of it offhand. Yeah, automotive, I think is maybe one.
Service, or gas station.
Main level residential.
Oh, main level residential is one of the current existing code is a difference. In B1 and B2, single family residential use is permitted.
Yeah.
Where it's not in the CBD. So that is a bit of a change. But there are some expanded uses, like for instance, we do not permit automotive, like we wouldn't put a car dealership within the CBD, but you could in B1 or B2. But really we'd have to look at I could pull up if you'd like to see the list, but I think that might be better to get into when we get into.
No, I'm
discuss
just,
uses
yes,
later.
I'm just wondering, you know, if you were to include it in CBD, but expand what's acceptable in CBD.
You can do that.
Yeah, well, so CBD has more restrictions, yet less in terms of setbacks and such.
Well, you know, as Jeff's pointed out, the people that are on the south side of Third Street are exempt from parking requirements, but if you're across the street, you have to provide parking. Same street, just you happen to be on the wrong side.
Wendy, do you know anything about this and the owners there? Or?
Well, there's the hair salon, there's the cupola space, there's the small match moved into the lower level of the 4 condoplex there, and there's a commercial off the office above that. The other side, they kind of use it as a, though I don't think it's permitted, I think they do it anyway. There's my office and my parking lot. And the American Legion and American Legion parking lot is all that B1, B2 corner. There's the purple is a private home.
Okay, so a smattering. Karen.
When you get on the other side, there's Burley Insurance. And I think that there's a commercial.
City.
City parking lot.
Well, so if I could just, and thank you, John, for highlighting the importance of preservation, and for you, Bill, too. Keep in mind, if you go from B1 to CBD there, then we'll see where the old Mossberg headquarters is, where the old Harbor Light is. Those could be Burley Insurance buildings with multiple right up to the sidewalk type building. That's not what you want to see. And especially when we're talking about keeping the historic character. And imagine if you lived in the old Gillian home, which is just to the east of the Mossberg. How would you like to live next to that? I mean, I think you'll really change the character of Third Street if you make that CBD.
Wait a minute, how many homes are actually in there? One.
Between Gardner and Spring?
There's a couple.
Two.
There's at least two that I can think of offhand. There might be a third or a fourth.
Oh.
But between Spring and Spring.
Church, which is new home, that all those are homes. Even the old Mossberg headquarters is still a structure, it's a home.
There is a home even in the CBD to the east.
Now, homes can exist.
Yeah.
I know, but what
say,
you'd be
it's all-
doing is be allowing that for those homes to have a lot more value to be torn down and be multi-story units, right? Without a setback, you're gonna.
This is a business, these are two business zoning
Now
districts.
you're taking value from it.
So
No, we're not taking it, Mark, if we keep it as B1 and not CBD.
If you add value by making it CBD, you're taking value by keeping it B1.
I don't want to change it to CBD, I would like to see it remain B1 for that section, you're gonna change the whole look of Third Street. Jeff has already explained, if it's CBD, you're up to the sidewalk.
the zoning doesn't make buildings get torn down immediately and things happen, right?
And you guys really shouldn't be working on values.
You should be working on character though, Mark.
On the
That's
master
one of our
plan.
characters.
All right. So anyway, planning commission, let's net this out. Do you see a need for two business zoning districts today?
No.
Definitely not. Okay, so there's an opportunity there to either collapse those into one or to collapse both into the CBD. What's your gut at this point?
I think we can collapse B1 and B2. But for now, to play safe and not put them into the CBD for a couple of reasons. One is there are some homes sprinkled in there. The other is, I think the issue of setbacks and all that needs to be explored. We may later decide to combine it into CBD. I'm not quite comfortable just jump to that right now.
I totally agree.
I agree too. I think some some higher density business space, but maybe not lot line to lot line.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna comment on, was that perhaps not ready for CBD yet. But I think one business district down there makes sense, but I would suggest we look at what's allowed there. Because again, this might be an area where we could look at, well, we might get some residential down there. Upper story residential and things like that. I do think that in many of the cases in Harbor Springs, the best and highest return on property is residential. Because residential decisions are typically made, they're emotional decisions. You don't have to justify a business plan to have a house or something like that. So highest and best use tends to be residential. I think probably for that reason, I would say, I mean, I like the idea of the CBD expanding because I think we need that. We need some more opportunity for people, but to have that, for what John said earlier, we need more people to make that work. So they sort of go hand in glove. So I think it's something that will take time to get there, but it certainly does not make sense to have a B1, B2 through there. But when we get to that, to what they actually is allowed there, and maybe what the setbacks are, we look at that a little bit harder to think about maybe a little bit more intensification.
Okay, so it sounds like consensus is combine those two into something to be defined.
Yes.
Possibly in the CBD later, possibly not. Okay,
And should we also look, Bill, at, B2 above the block?
yes, we should.
Yes. And incorporate that into this business district.
Yeah, Jeff, can you scroll up above the block?
Convince me.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing it right now. I would also, I guess, maybe recommend, because we have B2 with the commercial aspects over here near State and Lake. And then we also have the ROS, which is basically like commercial uses over on the other end of Lake here. If that's all in one conversation, if we feel that one zoning district could cover both areas, or if we feel that we need to separate those two. There is also, of course, B2, which is the Fairview Plaza up there by State Fairview.
I think what's currently shown as B2 and the ROS are probably different in my mind.
Why?
The character of the businesses in B2 is more of a strip mall parking lot, whereas the ROS is more they still look like single family homes.
But they don't have to be.
When you're talking about the B2 strip mall area there the northern edge.
Well, yeah, but also the Harbour Market or IGA would fit. That's a similar type of business.
Car wash.
Yeah, different car wash, different than the ROS.
Gas station.
Well, over in the ROS district, you kind of have, it's not quite strip mall, but you've got the barbershop building that goes into some other businesses there. Architecturally, they're a little bit different design. I think that's more to do with when they were constructed, if anything.
Tony, I also think if you think about functionally what they do, I mean, they are commercial, they're commercial and service. I would not have a problem with merging those.
Assuming we can make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't want to merge just to merge, right?
No,
I mean, if we want to have ROS different, have the different feel, the B2, let's
Like
make
we
it
can,
separate.
we can keep it.
But is the B1, if we're talking about business up on top of the bluff, is that the same as the business down below, or are they two separate business districts? Seems like they could be the same.
I think they could be consolidated.
Yeah, be the same,
Maybe it would be the same as their.
but ROS might be a little bit different.
I think the other thing.
You have different parking regulations on ROS versus, I'm guessing, the higher parking requirements on B2.
And the other part of it is some of those ROS lots are zoned, the frontage is zoned ROS, the rear part is zoned manufacturing.
That is something that we were trying to clean up in the new zoning map. This is the ROS district is a district where we had some parcels where the front was one district and the back was a different one. West Bluff is another example where that was occurring. So one thing that I think we should look at thinking about considering is trying to get away from that, where we have two different zoning districts that could apply to one parcel and just have the whole parcel be one or the other.
Jeff, what's your gut? Could there be some consolidation for businesses above the bluff in terms of the district?
I think so. I don't think we can look at what the, later what the uses are, but I think that there's a lot of similarities between them already. The only thing that I think is different between those two areas is more of the architectural design of the businesses that are there. So I think that there's certainly room to look at combining them. Obviously, we have some of the big ones like the IGA and Fairview Plaza that are very commercial. But in B2, you also have on the corner, you've got the insurance building that's in an old residential home. So there are some ROS style buildings in that area as well. So I think it's certainly plausible that we could look at combining them.
Okay. As a placeholder, we'll figure ROS could be combined with these potentially, or maybe the existing B2s could be the same as what we define below the bluff, if the requirements are the same. So we'd have fewer sets of rules and regulations. Okay, we got a placeholder.
Just ask a question. In the ROS area, are there setbacks as in residential from the street, from Lake Street requirements?
Good question.
I mean, it looks more residential as you drive
It
through.
does.
And I just wondered about setbacks, because that would be very different from below the bluff.
That'll be a key part of whether or not the combination is going to take place. If we want to do it. Okay. This may be maybe an easy one. How about mobile home park? We think we should keep a zoning district for mobile home.
Yeah.
All right, good. That was a good one. All right. So we're at a crossroads here, I'm gonna say. It's 8 o'clock. Our audience has done unbelievable work with us. And all that we need to consider is the residential districts. Should we take that up at our next meeting? When we're fresh, and we can go as deep as you want, Chip, with uses, and we can, Mr. Pierpont, that's when you would tell us about Glen Drive and your properties and what from there.
Yeah, I would support that, but before we leave the business districts, I just have a general comment. I think we've been sort of bouncing around as to what would constitute the need for a different flavor of business district.
Yeah.
And thinking that, eventually we're going to define the kinds of businesses in the central business district and then these other things. But I think the ingredients that might cause us to have multiple business districts would be, are there homes intermixed in the area or not? Is there a setback requirement as opposed to a conventional storefront or not? There may be a couple of others, but to me, those are the things that we should discuss next time when we hammer the different versions out. And that may, in fact, determine how many business districts we need.
Agreed. Yeah, I was hoping to count on John and Jeff to help us kind of triangulate and see if this is even reasonable to combine business districts, or if there's some gotchas there that we should look at.
I guess another one would be, what is the type of business, whether it's a repair shop for a car or not.
All right. Mark.
I think this would tie in, and with the discussion on the residential districts. Are you going to permit some business uses in the residential districts? And I think that's a very significant discussion that needs to be done. And if you're going to permit types of business uses in the residential neighborhoods, that casts a very different light on what businesses you have to zone for in other districts.
Right. Agreed. Karen.
One last thing. I think we lost maybe a couple residents to Petoskey because if they had been able to live in the manufacturing area where they had their shops or their studios or things like that, they would have stayed in Harbor Springs, so it's just something to consider.
And I don't wanna lose, I had brought that up, I don't wanna lose sight of that, I realized that. Obviously in a manufacturing, or I think we're calling it industrial. But to me, that has great potential. For a lot of things other than just boat storage. And I don't wanna lose sight of that.
I agree.
Good point.
Also, there is, when we get to residential, we're looking at multi-family, it is not on the old zoning map. And it never made it to, not the current zoning map, I should say. And it wasn't on the repealed zoning map as well, but there is a sliver, of apartments right next to the mobile home park called Windmere Pines that's multifamily. And it's not indicated, right now it's R2. And I believe in the repealed code, it was just.
It's residential neighborhood.
Right. Residential neighborhood, but it's currently multifamily, it's apartments.
I think that's a great, architecturally, it's a little dated now, that went in the mid to early eighties. But I think that's a really good example of a type of a project that can be done through a planned development. Whatever process we called it at that time in the eighties when that was done, but yeah, that's historically been an R2 district. Which would permit duplexes, but they came in the 1980s and they said, let's do a planned development here. Let's do something with similar density, but with a different style and feel. They put in some screening between that project and mobile homes and then the properties on Ottawa there. Yeah, and I think that's why the current use of the project of the property doesn't quite match up with how it's zoned, because it went through a project like that.
There's a hand up on Zoom.
I think that's. I think that's normal. I'm not positive, we can check.
No, could I just say briefly to Michael's comment there? I did give you a suggestion about the manufacturing or industrial now district moving and possibly looking at an entirely new zone of just apartment zone. That would address some of these higher density.
Thank you, Mark, for.
To add to that, well, I don't think we added apartments before, and this was sort of overlooked last time, but there are, you're aware that there was an effort to try to purchase that and develop it for the people that are currently living there in that same style. But probably the people who were thinking of doing that, being able to put a second story in that area would probably make the economics work better. The current owners didn't want to sell, but there was an effort made.
Great, well, let's definitely come back to that. When we're refining and defining. All right, now we have some more administrative work. We were supposed to go over red lines. If we could get it done, then we'd be done with that section. And we don't have to talk about outdoor display of goods tonight, do we, Jeff?
Actually, if you give me 2.5 minutes, I can wrap up outdoor display of goods for you.
I'd rather do section 5 first and get that off our list. And then, all right, we'll see how.
Wow.
Thank you all.
Article 5, red lines.
Article 5, yes. Okay, Gene, take it away. What have you found in the red line for Article 5?
Not much.
That's good.
There's a double period.
Then mine, Edge.
line 498. And line 519. It should be the persons. That's it.
I have one, also technical, when you're ready.
Yep.
Bob, what was, you had two of them. What was
Yeah, the
498.
498, there was a double period,
Yeah.
and line 519, it should say persons.
Oh, yes, okay, yes.
That's it.
Yeah, the L has been deleted.
Yeah.
So
There's an A still in there.
Oh, yeah. Article 5.13A, it's line number 149. We've been doing this all through it. Use insert districts instead of specifying the districts. Line 149. Thank
I think that's it.
That's it. Beautiful. That was Article 5. Oh, Article 10. Where we left that story is, that was, development, options, land development options. This was going with plan development. And, one of our residents had raised a concern about vulnerability using, language sole and solely, primary and primarily. And we took an action item, Jeff, John and I took an action item to go to the city attorney to get his view on that. And we had a pretty thorough call, and city attorney has an action item to go farther. So he's gonna research it further and come back to us and tell us if he recommends changes.
Thank you.
Jeff, is that how you remember it? Okay, perfect. So that's why John doesn't show it as a closed article, but we don't have red lines because it's in the hands of legal. Okay, beautiful. Jeff, outdoor display of goods. Net it out for us.
I'm gonna brief history lesson going way back to 2015 code. In the 2015 code, we currently have language regarding outdoor display of goods and how it may be done. When we were developing the 2024 code, we removed the language from the code allowing outdoor display of goods when it was actually adopted. Following that, a number of downtown businesses came to the city council and said, hey, we think this is a mistake. So city council adopted an ordinance in 2024 to temporarily add it back in. And this is where we kind of had some confusion. Some city staff was like, oh, hey, we have this 2024 ordinance that's sunsetting. We need to quick take action to allow outdoor display of goods back in. Not realizing that when the 2024 code went away and we restored the 2015 code, we restored the outdoor display of goods language in that. So I don't think that we need to take any action or really have an in-depth discussion right now regarding outdoor display of goods, other than to say that we should at some point, whether we, whatever section of the code we think it's appropriate to include it in, look at putting some language for outdoor display of goods back in the code, because it looks like something that the community does want to continue to see. So at whatever point that we want to address that.
Is the zoning code really the appropriate place for this, or is that more of a city code?
It depends on how you want to regulate and provide the, the enforcement. Whether you want that as a zoning enforcement, which would be me dealing with it. If it's in the city code, it would be like the police department or somebody addressing the issue. So, and how you want it, what types of things you want to be able to regulate. I think
Licensed.
Currently right now, we do not have a license. In the zoning code as it stands right now, we allow property owners within the confines of in front of their building that they can have adjacent up against the building up to 10 square feet of their property to be used for some type of outdoor display. I did meet with the DDA yesterday at their meeting to kind of briefly talk about this and ask them if there was any thoughts, questions, concerns regarding that. A couple of things that they did say that they would like us to review when we review outdoor display of goods is potentially allowing for more opportunity for outdoor display of goods when it's on private property. The 10 square feet really kind of came in line with property owners where the face of the building comes right up to the sidewalk on Main Street, where they can then have 10 square feet out into the sidewalk a little bit. Some property owners have some actual, property that's their own, on, like, for instance, on Third Street, where they'd like to be able to have, let's say, a larger display of goods than what's permitted by the code right now. Another concern that was brought up, might be a little bit more complicated discussion, but getting into the quality or types of displays. Whether or not like a rack of t-shirts would be an acceptable display or not. I haven't gotten into how we would get into that regulation. Or what the enforcement would look like, but that is another potential thing that they thought might be something of a concern to maybe discuss.
Okay, so we're probably gonna be recommending you put something into the zoning code at some point. Is that like a general provisions thing, John, would you think, or Article 5?
But Jeff, just to be clear, if I'm a store owner, I can operate under the language that you sent out without action tonight. They have something to go.
Initially, we were concerned that the ordinance from 2024 that sunset would not allow downtown businesses to have outdoor display of goods this summer. But with the 2015 code brought back into play, that's not a worry. They have guidance on how they can move forward.
Great, thank you, Jen. Okay, last thing on the agenda is member comments. Any other comments? Yes. Thank you very much. I hope you feel like we made some progress. I feel like we did in terms of our straw man, and we're gonna hit the residential districts head on and get that figured out next time. And we'll figure out how to organize the meeting. And that leads us to the question of when is next time?
Yeah.
Would you like to continue on a every 2-week track or twice a month? And if so, that would have us meeting again on June 5th. And then a 2-week break to the 19th. Actually, June 5th is a 3-week. What's that?
It'd be the 29th, 2 weeks from today, 29th.
After Memorial.
Yeah, so that's the question. Do we want a third meeting in May? Or would you care to have just the first and third Thursdays in June?
You had that on the original schedule. No, from 29th.
Yes, I had many schedules. Placeholders, but
I had it already in the calendar.
Oh, okay.
That's all I'm saying.
So if we did it on the 29th, that means we would have
A tornado watch.
3 weeks to the 19th.
Yeah.
Yes. And if we did it on,
We did it on the 5th,
we
in
have,
3 weeks between now and the 5th, and then 2 weeks. So
that's right.
the question is, do I have too many between now and the 19th? Probably yes. Do we want to have it on the 29th or the 5th?
Right. Is there benefit in hitting it again while it's still fresh, or is
Get crazy. You told this morning.
I don't think so.
It's up really there. You can see it.
Probably it's on the 5th. would be better.
I won't, I can't be here on the 29th on that.
Okay.
I mean, the 29th.
States. Special.
so the 5th sounds like it's better for a couple members.
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay,
I'll be remote.
okay. That's cool. So we'll have a special meeting on June 5th and our regular meeting on June 19th. Great, and so that gives us a few weeks to summarize our straw man and maybe refine things a little bit to see if we can go farther. All right, thank you so much, everybody. For figuring out.